It was a few weeks ago, maybe even a couple of months ago, you had posed this idea of possibly talking about destiny on one of our future podcasts. And at the time, I said I wanted to do a lot more research before we spoke about it because I felt like I wasn't sure exactly where I stand and what I believe about it. And I have since then done a little bit of research and I've spoken with ChatGPT. Um, but I can't say that I'm any closer to having a better idea of how I feel about it. But let's maybe just start with one thing that I asked ChatGPT, quite a broad topic this morning, just in preparation, was I said, please talk me through some of the concepts of destiny, predeterminism, determinism, fate, etc., from a philosophical and real life standpoint. And then ChatGPT said, certainly, and, and came up with these concepts deal with the idea of whether events are predetermined or influenced by some external force. Let's explore them from both philosophical and real life perspectives. So for destiny, it says destiny often implies that there is a predetermined course of events or outcomes in a person's life shaped by fate or a higher power. Some people believe in destiny, thinking that certain life events or opportunities are preordained. Others see it as a way to find meaning in life's twists and turns. For predeterminism, it suggests that all events, including human actions, are predetermined and inevitable, often by factors beyond our control. This concept can be challenging to reconcile with free will. Some argue that scientific determinism, such as in physics, implies a certain level of predeterminism. So then determinism it defines as that every event, including human actions, has a cause or a set of causes, making them predictable to some extent. In psychology and sociology, determinism is debated regarding whether external factors or personal choices play a more significant role in human behavior. It goes on to talk about fate. Fate suggests that there's a fixed, unalterable course of events in one's life, often controlled by supernatural forces or divine will. I think that comes up a lot in religion, but you don't hear the word fate in religion. I think you hear faith more, but fate. And then the real life scenario, people sometimes attribute significant life events to fate or destiny. This belief can provide comfort or help make sense of unexpected occurrences. These all sound very similar, all the definitions so far. So I don't know if there's any specific, something that I'm missing.
Yes, because my first question was going to be, please just run the definition of destiny and fate by me again, because
Yeah.
it sounds like such similar concepts.
So for destiny, it said a predetermined course of events or outcomes in a person's life shaped by fate or a higher power. So then when it explains fate suggests that there is a fixed, unalterable course of events in one's life, often controlled by supernatural forces or divine will.
Hmm. In
Um,
other words,
yeah,
destiny or
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
so this feels a bit like when we spoke about decency and moral, who's moral and
Yeah,
who's
yeah.
ethics, and going around in circles to try and get to the
Exactly.
actual
Yeah.
concept. I think an important one to look at is free will. So it says here, free will is the idea that individuals have the capacity to make choices that are not determined by external factors or fate. Many ethical, legal, and personal decisions are based on the assumption of free will. People debate the extent to which free will exists alongside determinism.
Hmm.
And then there's two more that ChatGPT threw in that I didn't specifically ask about. So existentialism, it
Hmm.
says existentialism rejects the idea of predetermined fate and emphasizes individual freedom and choice in shaping one's own destiny. So that obviously works alongside free will. Um,
Yeah.
Existentialist philosophy encourages taking responsibility for one's actions and creating meaning in an otherwise indifferent universe. And the final one was randomness.
Hmm.
Randomness suggests that some events have no cause or purpose and occur unpredictably. Quantum physics suggests inherent randomness at the subatomic level. In daily life, seemingly random events can challenge deterministic worldviews.
Wow. So, so, I mean, yeah, randomness. I mean, do you think it's um, if you get in your car and you drive somewhere and you get caught in a traffic jam, is that predetermined or is that completely random?
This is my problem is I have no idea. I don't know.
Mm. If you go to the bank and there's a bank robbery and you get caught up in that and you get shot, is that random or is that predetermined? So, it, so in other words, I I think that there's a lot of randomness in life
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to destiny.
Yeah.
If 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 everything is destined, then I don't know. If your teeth are going to fall out by the time that you're 45, why bother brushing or flossing?
Yeah.
If if you are destined to live until you're 90, why bother with saying no to the donuts?
Yeah.
So so there are all of these things that I have a problem with in terms of destiny. So I mean, I can take it even further because this is something that really bothers me about the whole destiny thing. And it stands a lot closer, as opposed to religion in a sense. But if I look at um, things like war and hunger, um, and child trafficking and rape and murder,
Mm-hmm.
um, to the people that these things happen to, was a human being. Because if we say that everything has been predetermined, does that mean the birth of that child was also predetermined? So, so who brings a child into the world
Mm-hmm.
to allow somebody to abuse that child,
Yeah.
or to die in a war, or
Yeah.
to die of hunger? That's a part that doesn't really make sense. Well, it makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
Yeah. That that makes me think of there's a clip of Stephen Fry talking about God, and if God exists, he's not a very nice person, and I wouldn't want to be praising him for eternity or whatever the um because he
If
highlights some of those types of things like the cancer in children and some of like the terrible things that happen in the world
Yeah,
and
so that is obviously if you assume that if there's a God, then that that God has got all of these things planned out.
yeah.
So and that really doesn't make sense to me at all. There is just too much continuously new and novel happening.
Yeah.
So well, that was kind of like figured out. There was a there was a predestined plan that Sam Bankman-Fried was in the year 2022 going to defraud millions of people through a cryptocurrency. I mean, really?
Yeah,
That doesn't make sense to me.
but that is assuming that destiny is linked to a higher being or someone who has predestined the world or whatever, who has who has put a plan into place. Aren't there other possibilities under determinism? Or I know haven't finished watching the whole podcast, but you had mentioned the Avi Loeb chat with, what's his name, Brian Keating.
Correct.
I'm about halfway through, but they're also talking about the possibility of a higher power, because Avi Loeb is obviously Jewish. I think Brian Keating might be Jewish
also
as well.
Jewish.
Yeah. So they mention some of the texts in the Torah, and Avi mentioned something about the higher power could be like a technological higher power, because they were talking in this podcast about aliens or other life.
Correct, yeah.
So I'm also just curious, if is a higher power necessarily a godlike figure, or could it be something else?
Yeah, so I try to separate the two, the big question about a higher power, etc., and destiny. So in other words, how often do you hear people say, well, that person was destined to become a leader or a famous composer
Or a great
or
sportsman. Yeah.
correct. So what does that actually mean? Does that mean that Steve Jobs, doesn't matter what he did in his life, he would eventually have ended up with?
Yeah.
And that Tony is obviously just one example. It doesn't make sense to me.
So again, I mean, some of the concepts of determinism go a little bit over my head, but isn't the point that based on who you are as a person, your upbringing, your life experiences, every decision you make is always the decision you were going to make? And so it's not just that Steve Jobs was destined to be great, it's that every decision that he made in life leading him to that point were the decisions that he would make based on his circumstances and who he is. I don't know.
So in other words, does that then mean that there's no free will?
This is the question. Are the next words that come out of my mouth the words that I was always going to say, or?
Yes. I don't think so.
Yeah.
So if you have no free will, you see, these are some of the things that I'm struggling to kind of form a solid theory on, in terms of, okay, cool, this is what I believe about this,
Yeah.
because if you read or listen to Sam Harris talk about there's no free will, etc., he makes a very compelling argument for that.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, okay, cool, I didn't think of it in that way or that sense, etc. But then, like you say, if you just take a simple example about the next thing that you are going to say, does that mean that? And if I think of it like that, if I have no free will of anything, or maybe I'm trying to make it too abstract. If it was destined that I'm going to have pizza for dinner tonight, why am I even wondering about what is
making a salad?
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm trying to make it too abstract in terms of silly little things. Am I going to have tea or am I going to have coffee? But it seems to me like if you have no free will, then it should come down to that.
Yeah.
So what do you do then with somebody who, for example, um, is or was an addict, and then got to a point where I'm just using an addict as an example here because um, there's so many of these stories out there about somebody who kind of hit rock bottom and saw, wow, if I continue along this path, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And then decide to, you know, get whatever help or treatment, etc., and walk away from that life
Yeah.
and continue to live successful, productive, oftentimes a hell of a lot more productive and successful and meaningful life.
Yes.
Was that not free will? Was it free will to become addicted in the first place? I don't know.
Yeah.
There are so many of these contrasting thoughts or ideas that I struggle to find, yeah, something that I can really get behind in terms of, okay, cool, these are my beliefs and these are my
Yeah.
thoughts around
Yep.
around destiny and free will.
That's my problem as well. I find the concepts quite hard to grasp because I feel like you can debate both sides of the story. And then you listen to someone like you just mentioned, Sam Harris, who we were introduced to with lying, and he has such
Mm,
a compelling um, like piece about lying that makes you really agree with everything he says, and this is someone that you agree with, and this is really interesting, and he's such a great orator, and it feels like he can convince you of anything. And then you listen to him talking about something like determinism and you think, well, this is amazing, this is so great the way he talks about it. And then you listen to someone else who talks on the other side and you think, oh, actually there's a few good points on this side too. So I'm not
yeah,
really sure. It's one of those, it feels to me like one of those things that you just can't answer. You'll never get to the bottom of it.
exactly. So how many examples can you give of somebody who did something amazing or um, became famous or so, and there's that it was a twist of fate that caused them to something that I recently listened to is talked about Albert Einstein, and Einstein didn't get admitted to some fancy college or whatever and ended up working in the patent office. And sitting there working in the patent office gave him time and the opportunity to write these papers about relativity, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if he had gone into the university that he initially applied for, uh, you know, some professor may very well have persuaded him to follow another route.
Yeah.
Um, so, so there was an event that happened, which then led to this person doing A, B, or C. Um, I mean, there are really so many examples of people who I, I don't want to call it fate, but a specific set of circumstances
Yeah.
cause their lives to take a different direction.
Yeah.
Um, and again, if I use the word fate, then I have to say, well, I believe in destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, and I don't. I just can't think that
Yeah.
all of these things were, you
Completely
know.
random.
Well, I think it's a hell of a lot more random.
You mean than predetermined?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Um, I mean, just think in terms of your your own life,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like the experiences that you had in the last 5 years versus what you maybe thought you could have,
Yeah.
and where you're going to end up, etc. And and again, I mentioned earlier that I often wonder, am I trying to make this too abstract? But where's the cutoff point? Do we say, well, it's fine, you have free will whether you're going to have pizza or pasta tonight for dinner, but when it comes to what career, and in which country you're going to live, and those kind of things, uh, that's destiny or that's predetermined. And I, I, so is there, to what extent do genetics play a role in destiny?
I think that was mentioned here somewhere. Um, I'm just trying to see if I continued the conversation with ChatGPT here. Um, oh, I did ask. I asked ChatGPT to please debate determinism and free will.
Okay.
And so he says the determinism argument, causality. Determinism argues that every event, including human actions, has a cause or set of causes. This implies that our choices are the result of prior circumstances and influences, making them predictable to some extent. So that's not saying that it's destiny. That's saying based on your circumstances, certain
Yeah.
things are um,
Yes.
clear or predictable. Scientific support, many aspects of our universe, particularly in physics, follow deterministic laws. This suggests that even on a macroscopic level, determinism plays a role in shaping events. Um, okay, here's the part that I was looking for. Psychological factors. Psychological studies often show how external factors, upbringing, and experiences influence human behavior. This supports the idea that our choices are determined by these influences. So
Mm.
I think that there's obviously a place for the two to coexist, determinism and free will. But
Yes.
like you say, I don't know where does the line get drawn?
But determinism, that's different to destiny,
Destiny,
right?
yeah. But it's
So,
more in line with destiny than obviously the other side of the argument, I think.
yeah, for me, determinism, like it mentioned there, in terms of your upbringing, etc., etc., um, that will influence your choices going forward
Yeah.
and the outcomes. But that is still a hell of a long way from destiny. So for me, then if we're all destined to be whatever we turn out to be, and that's why I'm asking about what the role of genetics could potentially be in this. What do I mean by that? Does it mean that if destiny is a thing, then it means that whoever my father and my mother were, that was also, because then it was obviously destined that they would have a child and that child
Yes.
would be me.
Yeah.
But if you look at all over the world, people who rise into certain positions of prominence, whether and I don't want to use the word rise to positions of power because it's much broader than that. to me. So, in other words, you can look at people who rise to prominence in the arts
Mm-hmm.
or in sport or in business or in politics or in whatever and so on.
Yeah.
So, and that's not necessarily power. It's it's prominence to me. So, is there anything in terms of genetic makeup that can that that one can look to and say, well, that has got a big influence on whether you excel or become prominent in a specific field. Now, I know that we kind of look at, well, okay, Jamaicans apparently they can run very fast. Kenyans they can run very far.
Yeah.
That's kind of like
I thought
a very
Jamaicans
high.
could bobsled.
Yes. Yeah, then you kind of get into all those anomalies as well. But I do wonder about that in terms of if you if you go through, I don't know, if you go a little further back in history, um, there was like a high percentage of classical composers that were, I don't know, German, Austrian.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had a couple of Italians and a couple of Russians.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the exact chronological order, etc. But I suppose that has to do with the environment that you kind of, and the environment and society that you grow up. Um, anyway, I'm nowhere closer than I was at the start of this conversation in terms of, does destiny really play a role?
Yeah.
And it seems to me, maybe I was just asking this, what is your view on um, the relationship between destiny and free will?
I'm not sure where I stand on this, but I do believe that, I mean, everything that I want to achieve for myself in life, I work for. And I feel like that's free will because I can choose not to and then not achieve the things that I want to achieve. So, but at the same time, then I don't know if that drive in me or that want to achieve those things is destiny or predetermined, or if that's something that was always there. I don't know. I find it a really difficult concept to grasp this. But I'm a big believer in we make our
Yeah.
own destinies. We kind of
And is that that belief that doesn't come from a education or upbringing or an environment
no. I mean, it
that
might.
comes
I don't
from.
know, but I feel like it comes from within.
Mm, yeah, and look, I agree with that. I mean, there's a hell of a lot there that I agree with. And I think, if we go and sit and think about it, we can all name many, many things that we didn't achieve or that we didn't do simply because we didn't put in the effort.
Yeah.
And not because I'm completely incapable of doing A, B, and C. It's just that I didn't, for whatever reason,
Yeah,
put
but then
in
maybe
the
the
effort.
reason is because that thing wasn't meant for you and you were meant to be on a different path. I don't know. I find it so difficult to get my head around because I don't know. It's very intangible. It's so hard to like
it's very hard,
Yeah.
but it is something that often come up in my mind. So usually when I reach for that third donut, and I think you really shouldn't eat this, and I go, well, I don't have any free will. It's predestined.
Yeah.
I have no free will, so I'm going to eat this donut. And obviously, that is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I should have that control, and I do.
Yeah.
So it's very as you say, confusing. It's difficult. Maybe there's a hell of a lot more literature
Yes.
that if I had the free will to explore.
Well, I think what makes it strange for me is it feels like an impossible concept to grasp. So then when you hear people like Sam Harris feeling so convicted in his belief and understanding of it, you just wonder how he got there. Because has he just made the decision that this is what I'm going to believe and this is what I'm going to tell everyone else and why it's correct? Or because no one knows.
Well, in an academic like Sam Harris's case, obviously a hell of a lot of work and research has gone into it to get to that point where he can go, well, I've got a theory about this, and in fact, I'm going to write a book, and there must have been peer-reviewed papers
Yeah.
submitted, etc., etc., which doesn't really mean it's true, but it does mean that a lot of thought has gone into this.
Yeah.
And, it has been prodded and poked and investigated from all angles,
More than just
etc.
asking ChatGPT to have a debate
More
on
than,
two terms.
yeah. Um, but definitely something that I cannot agree with is that there's a predetermined destiny for each of us in terms of the path that you're going to follow through life, what you're going to achieve, when you're going to die, um, all of that. I truly cannot get behind that idea because, as you said earlier, if you take the Stephen Fry kind of
Mm-hmm.
view on this, that would be a pretty cruel um, world that we live in.
Yeah. I find it quite depressing to think about life like that. Because it's
Yeah,
like you said, well, what's the point then? Why
yes,
why do we do anything? Just because
correct.
we do and we're robots and that's what we do. I don't know.
And for me, that is where the contradiction in a lot of the religion come in.
Mm-hmm.
You are you are told that you must do this and don't do that and behave like that and don't behave like that. Otherwise, you're going to hell
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the religion is. But in the very next sentence, they will tell you that your life is predetermined and predestined.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't make sense to me.
Sure. So this happened to us a few weeks ago. We had a heavy chat, and we felt like we needed to bring it back down again in our next one. So I think that might be happening next week. So look forward to something a little bit more lighthearted. But please
Yes,
weigh in
please.
on this. Let us know what you think and feel about destiny and determinism and free will and fate. And I'd love to hear other people's opinions because I don't know.
Yeah,
And that's been quite clear from our chat today is we don't know and we would love to know. I don't know if I'd
yeah,
love to know.
exactly. No, absolutely. It's always good to hear other opinions about
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and not necessarily just academics.
yeah,
Um, to hear what other people think about this, and kind of um, help make sense of a complicated subject.
yeah. I think with that said, I'm probably also going to put the Sam Harris free will book on my list and find someone who has a counter argument to his and put that book on my list too. And maybe I'll be a little bit closer to deciding how I feel about free will and determinism and destiny and fate. But this will be one of those ones I think we'll check in again in the future and see where we stand on it then.
Maybe a good idea would be to send Sam an email and ask him if he knew that he was going to become such an asshole after being so well respected. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, let's do
Cool.
something light-hearted next week.
Thank you, Herman, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks.